And before we go through the list, I just want to say all these opinions are my own. You're probably going to often disagree with them. And I think that's interesting. And if you see me on the Highlander streets, please come and argue with me about these cards.
Hell
Because
yes.
let me talk to you about Imazawa's GJ.
7 million.
7 Point Highlander.
Hello and welcome to the 7 Point Cast. My name is Liam and I'm joined by my co-host Mouse.
Hey, glad to be here once again for another episode of 7 Point Cast.
Today we're going to be speaking to a venerable legend of the Canberra 7 Point Highlander community, Max DK. Thanks for joining us.
I don't know if I'm a legend, Liam. I'm just a figure. I'm just there. But I'm not a legend.
Legendary humility. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to become a Magic player and more importantly a 7 Point Highlander player?
Well, I've been playing Magic for basically as long as I can remember. I started playing when I was like 10 and I've been playing ever since, and with like a few little gaps like a lot of Magic players have. But recently, after COVID, I kind of had heard of Highlander. My friends had been high on it, and I thought about it as this mythical format where you could play dual lands, and that you must be a crazy Magic player if you owned a dual land, because that's just way too much to spend on a Magic card. And now we know the dark rabbit hole forces all us Magic players to eventually acquire their set of dual lands. But
You're actually the second person who has said like words to the effect of like, dual lands are insane to own, but then this format made me go and spend all this money on the
And to be fair, it is insane to spend this money, but I've done it, and I know plenty of people who have as well. But yeah, I started in the format playing elves, and I was like, I'm never going to buy an expensive card. And then I bought a Cradle, and then I fell off the horse and started buying all these expensive cards. But I love Highlander. I've been playing, like, I started off playing mostly elves, and then I kind of veered off, and now I play a bit of everything. But my kind of go-to deck, and the deck that is beloved to me, is Jund. I feel like the deck does everything that I want a Magic the Gathering deck to do. And I was very lucky one year. I came second at Nats, not the most recent Nats, but the Nats before, and with Jund, and that kind of helped me kind of stamp at least one small claim to success in this format.
Well, look, as someone who has also come second at Nats, some time ago, I'm going to self-servingly say that puts you in the legend bucket because I like to say that about myself, maybe. But certainly, yeah, can I ask, like, definitely, if you've been playing since you were really young, because as another person, I think I started playing when I was 11. What was the first format? Which was like what was like kind of getting released when you started playing?
Oh, so it was Guild Pact. I had this like Gruul pre-constructed like beginner deck with the original Borborygamos, and it was really funny because recently, I re-met one of the first people I played Magic with. And in primary school, I was a little bit of like a rogue idiot who all I wanted to do was play Magic. And there was one day where I really wanted to play Magic and no one else wanted to play Magic with me. And so I had this Gruul pre-constructed deck. And the best card in this deck was Scion of the Wild. And so I told this person, play with me, and if you win, I'll give you my Scion of the Wild. Right? Yep. And Scion of the Wild is an atrocious card now. But back in the day, like, it was a pretty cool card.
And so one green, it's got the almost the Voice of Resurgence token thing. Like, it's just as big as how many creatures you have.
Yeah, exactly. So like the best card in the world in my eyes when I was a kid was this Voice of Resurgence token. And so I'm playing against this guy. I lose, obviously. And I don't give him my Scion of the Wild because I'm like a precocious 10-year-old. And he told me that every day that I didn't give it to him, the amount of Scion of the Wilds doubled. So I think I owe this man more Scion of the Wilds than atoms exist in the raw universe.
Unbelievable. You could go from here to the moon with that many Scion of the Wilds.
Oh, yeah.
Well, if there's any deck capable of generating that much value, it's the Jund deck, isn't it?
Yeah, Jund is a value machine the best thing about Jund is every time you draw a card, it's a good card because you don't play bad cards, and I I feel like you just kind of get away with obscene things because your top deck is always like some random 6/6 or some random card that draws you more cards, but it's also a beater, so you can't complain.
I
Well,
will ask quickly two other questions on this backstory because I'm feeling the resonating here. Because I remember one was just a brief anecdote when I started playing. I had that same experience of kind of like this older kid being like, "Yeah, man, I can help you get into Magic." And this guy in my mind was like so experienced with the game, and he built a deck for me. It was like a Scourge slash Mirrodin like solves with equipment thing for $20, and I thought, "Oh, this guy's so good." But like it had Darksteel Gargoyle in it, which is like a 7 mana 3/3 indestructible or something like that, which is like clearly should not have been in the deck at all. Way too expensive. But I also met that bloke like way later in life, just being like, it's like, oh yeah, look, here's the guy who got it all started for me. It truly is a surreal feeling.
Yeah, it is crazy when you realize how much of your life has been dominated by this game and these people who don't even know how much of an impact they had on you and like changing your life because this game has become so much of your life.
It's crazy. And another one as well, I was wanted to ask is, like, were you because you've been playing in that era? Did you play in the original Jund era? Like, I'm talking like Putrid Leech, Sprouting Thrynax, Bloodbraid Elf. Like,
The worst part was in that era, that was like my first and only significant gap when I was like a teenager. And so I didn't really know of those cards. And I discovered like the true Prime Jund only retroactively. Oh my God, I
oh,
wish I could cast a Putrid Leech and it'd be good. Like, can we play that in Highlander, please?
oh, if only. Like yeah, I remember like when I my first FNMs, when I was going to FNMs, I was playing mono like vampires, and the Jund deck was just like there was only one way I could win, and if that happened to be that I drew all of my Gatekeeper of Malakir, runner, like turn 3, 4, 5. Otherwise, the Jund deck was just impossible to value out, and the guy who piloted it used to win all the time.
Yeah, like also Sprouting Thrynax versus Gatekeeper of Malakir does not seem like a good exchange.
Look, that one absolutely not, but like it was, most of the other vampires versus anything the Jund deck had to put up was not it. At least the Gatekeeper was a guaranteed 2 for 1.
Yeah,
Uh,
fair enough.
all right, well look, let's first of all, I mean, I'm really excited about this episode because one of the things you've brought to us is aside from just talking about Jund, you want to talk to us about in your quest to find the most efficient cards, some cards you found to be really inefficient that people should stop playing. So that's coming up in like the second half, and I'm really keen to get into that. But first, let's talk about this Jund list.
Yeah, so this is the list that I played at CanCon at the beginning of the year, and so there are a few cards that are kind of like signs of the times and like
Mhm.
sideboard cards that were particularly targeted for the meta, and main deck pieces that were particularly targeted for meta. Notably, the Ashiok that I moved from the sideboard to the main deck, but I think this list is kind of typical of what I believe Jund should be, which is all your like 2 drops have so much equity that if you draw them later, it doesn't matter. You've got these planeswalkers that give you like immense amounts of value and win you the game on their own. You've got good answers that like react to whatever your opponent's doing, and you're playing just a bunch of really flexible cards. And your deck can kind of play a game that sits on any axis. Like I love playing a deck where I feel like even though some matchups are better than others, I'm prepared to beat whatever faces me.
Okay. So can we go through maybe a couple of the card choices which I'm interested to hear about?
Yeah,
So
yes, please.
the first thing is the points. Personally, I love Ren and Six. Like every Jund player I've spoken to, I've always said you've got to be on Ren and Six. And like Minsc and Boo as well is just like such an obnoxious impact on the board. But I've seen a lot of Jund lists recently are favoring this kind of like double Mox approach or maybe single Mox and kind of angling towards. Do you have any thoughts about like Moxes in Jund versus these kind of high impact threats?
Yeah, so basically, when I've been toying around with the list, there's only one card that I'm married to having in my point spread, and that's Minsk and Boo. I feel like Minsk and Boo is such a draw to Jund because it's a card that single handedly either wins you the game or gets you back in it. and makes your opponent basically have two answers, or you kind of run away with the game.
Mm.
And so I want to play a list which is a most successful kind of path for Minskimbu, which automatically, as it's a 2 point card, rules out double mock strategies. And I find that even though moxes are powerful and good, and a lot of the Jund cards are just powerful value pieces, I don't think Jund is a deck that leverages the extra mana from a Mox as well as it does having like two more powerful cards. And I want my top decks to be so good that when I top deck like a pointed card, like I top deck my Reanimate, or I top deck my Renin 6, or I top deck whatever, that is really what matters to me. Even though I've seen a lot of Mox builds, I know Ben from Wollongong was talking with me for a while about mock strategies, and I think it can be good for my style where I want the top deck to always be a heater. This style works best for me.
Okay. And with the top decking thing, another thing I noticed is that you are running some mana dorks, right? Like it's not an all-in mana dork strategy. Deathrite obviously is very flexible, but Halfling and Ignoble Hierarch, they're mana dorks through and through. How do these are these just like a necessary concession to the speed of the format? Like, because they're obviously not the best top decks. Like, how do they kind of fit in?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a concession to the speed of the format, and also the fact that like a lot of the 3 drops are set up so that when I slam them on turn 3, I take over the game and I just laugh in your face as the Jund cards like power me through. Like Slimefoot and Squee on turn 2 is really good. And obviously it's also good with a Moxen, but these dorks also synergize with a lot of the cards in the deck. Like they're really good. You throw them to a Grist later on. They're really good at defending these Planeswalkers even when their mana is like not that important. But also Jund kind of uses the extra mana from the dorks at good points in the curve. Like, because 3 of your lands are these land cyclers instead, often you've got your dorks in play. He hasn't tapped for a few turns, but he taps for your 6 mana, you cast Troll, and you're just like off to the races. And those sort of parts of it I find are really impactful and make the dorks a necessary evil.
Right. So yeah, it's the land cyclers kind of weirdly enough actually give the dorks a way to use the extra mana. And the land cyclers you're quite like all in on them, right? Because I've seen a lot of people kind of go, oh, like Troll, Generous Sense, good enough, but Oliphant's really not. But this deck kind of really leans into that reanimate angle. Like, is that something you're still with in your current versions?
I'm so high on it right now. So the reason I'm high on it is because obviously there's more graveyard hate that's seeping into main decks, and there's definitely stuff in the sideboard. But all in all, you play these like really like powerful creatures that you can sneak out early, or your lands become split cards late in the game, which like really fits my kind of ethos of the top of your deck is your weapon, and you just want to like get to a point where you know your top decks are going to be better than your opponents. Like the amount of times I've attacked with that 5/7 Generous Ent for the win, where in could have been a forest. Also, I find in Highlander, people are like trimming down their lands, and I love that I'm playing a 21 land deck that functionally has 24 lands and 27 mana sources if you count the dorks. And you know you're always going to be slamming these 4s on time.
Yeah, that makes sense. And kind of speaking of the idea of the main deck graveyard hate, you're not shy on that yourself. We've got Keen Eye Curator and Scavenging Ooze and Voidwalker and Emperor of Bones. Like, is this and Ashiok, is this a nod to the meta you expected, or is this again? I've got an Endurance now that I see it as well. Is this a nod to the meta you're expecting, or is this a like help me understand how that works?
This one definitely was a metaphor for this particular tournament. I'd seen lots of people playing like all-in reanimator strategies and things that like kind of touch the graveyard, like this Jund list itself, where I felt like having access to these really powerful cards that also kind of hate the graveyard is really impactful. I love cards like Keen-Eyed Curator and Emperor of Bones because they're hateful. They stop your opponents doing the graveyard stuff they want to do. But also on their own, they're just great mid-range threats. Like I love the kind of split card of hate piece and mid-range beater.
Yeah, definitely. When I've built like control decks, I really like the modal creatures, which are kind of like removal on one side and threat on the other. It just helps the card always feel alive. Um, I'm just checking with the in the sorceries, the prosperity card I assume is Thoughtseize.
Yeah, that is Thoughtseize.
Yeah, and so we've got Thoughtseize, Inquisition, and Duress. Is the Duress is not a card I always see in the main. Help me understand that choice.
Yeah, so one of the weaknesses I feel like Jund is always 55% ish against like the creature mid-range decks. But some in the area where it hits 45% or lower is a lot of these combo strategies. So this version was pre-boarded for a lot of combo things that I was expecting going in, like the reanimator strategies, like things like Storm, like Breach, and having access to that main board duress is good. But also, when I'm up against mid-range decks, most of the cards that really, really matter, like instantly win them the game, are things that I can pop with a duress. Like, for example, Fortheolingus, Minsk, and Boo. Just these like really powerful threats that also happen to get tagged by a duress.
And so when you've got an opening hand with a 1 mana Dorker and a 1 mana hand attack spell, which one are you leading on?
Oh, I'm always leading, unless it's a particular matchup that I feel like has some weird texture. I'm always leading with the dork because you have to answer my dork, and then it puts you on the back foot. You often like use a removal spell where you could have been doing something to develop instead, and I either have you on the back foot and then get to duress you the next turn, or I just send my 3-drop and the hand attack comes later.
So does Bolt the Bird, is that a true mantra against this deck? Like for someone playing against Jund, should they be bolting the bird?
Oh, most definitely. I feel like the deck, even though it only runs 3 dorks in my configuration, it is a great dork deck because you've got really powerful 3-drops that you can slam into. Like against a lot of mid-range strategies, like turn 2 Slimefoot and Squee, turn 2 Grist the Hunger Tide. These are things that really matter. And having the Dirk on the dork on 4 is super impactful because you're slamming Sheoldred, Ravenloft, Pyroglyph. Like all the cards are heaters, and because of that, letting me jump one up the curve is really impactful.
And would I be correct in saying that this deck would be super likely to keep a hand that looks something like one land, mana dork, mana cycler, reanimate, and it wouldn't be crazy for you to be like, oh, I'm going to lead on the dork because turn 2 I'm going to land cycle them, reanimate it immediately.
That's like a dream hand mouse. Like that's what I'm looking for with this deck because
So definitely getting rid of the dork is in some ways could actually be making way more stumbles than you think if the hand happens to lean on a land cycler.
yeah, and especially because 3 of your lands are land cyclers, there are so many ways to use like your mana that it's always great to have that one extra. One thing that I'd just like to jump back towards from our talk earlier about pointed cards, the weakest pointed card in this deck that I still think is actively great, but I feel like people are kind of ignoring these days, is Fable of the Mirror Breaker. And I think it's a really interesting card to discuss because in preparation for CanCon this year, I tinkered with a lot of different setups, but I really always wanted Fable because obviously I've talked a lot about how I really want the card that I'm having on the top to be super impactful. But because you don't have a lot of card selection, sometimes you just draw like the answers in the wrong order when you don't need threats. And like Fable is such a get out of jail free card in that respect. It can get the lands off the top. And I just think the card is so crazy, even though it does have this now seemingly hefty 1 point price tag.
Yeah, what would be the best 1 point card which is just missing out on a spot?
So I'm just trying to remember what I cut. I think like one of the interesting things here is I'm sorry, I'm just trying to remember what I cut in preparation. I should have the points list up on the side. But
This looks like a card which could fit in this.
so sorry, what was that, Mouse?
Could it be Bowmasters? Looks like it might be able to.
I cut Bowmasters. I feel like Raise the Alarm is just not playable in 2025. And most of the time I cast Orcish Bowmasters, it just feels like Raise the Alarm.
Okay.
And I feel like people are good at not playing into it, and also it just doesn't feel like the crazy creature beta that it used to. Also, I tinkered with versions of this deck that were playing Strip Mine and Waste now that that package is brought down to two. But
Mhm.
none of those cards really, or a Moxen, really stood up to the power of Fable plus Ren and Six in my eyes.
Yep. Cool. One other card I wanted to ask about is there's this new card in Aether Drift called Intimidation Tactics, which is I think like the best single black removal spell I've had in a long time. Which is it takes an artifact or creature, exiles it, but it also has cycling 3. Have you thought about this card at all?
Yeah, so it's really interesting because I've been thinking a lot of like the role of Dreams of Steel and Oil in
Mm.
Jump prior to Intimidation Tactics being released. And I feel like Intimidation Tactics and Dreams of Steel Oil sit in very similar spaces, obviously, because they do similar things. But Dreams of Steel and Oil has the graveyard hate aspect, and Intimidation Tactics has the cycling, which means that it's a sick top deck, which I love. You know me, I'm Mr. Top Deck. I feel like in more creature based metas, if I was expecting lots of like white red mid ranges and that sort of stuff, I could see the dressed slot being replaced with something like Intimidation Tactics. I have one sitting in my Highlander box right now as a card that I think is like a playable. But I think in this current meta where there's lots of graveyard and having the random graveyard thing is impactful, I'd often want to play Dreams and Steel and Oil over it, but it's very close.
Yeah, cool. Thinking about the sideboard, Lime, there's a card which Lime and I will probably like have a hefty agreement on as like awesome the deck. Lime, do you know which card I'm talking about in the sideboard? Far out. Is Liam still here? That's
Yeah,
great.
I'm here. I'm thinking.
Oh yeah, come on, Liam. We love this card.
We love this card.
Is it Carpet?
Oh, Bitter Ordeal. Oh yeah,
Yeah,
do we
what
love
I'm
this
talking about.
card?
Talk to me about why you guys love Bitter Ordeal so much.
Like Liam and I have this like take on how to beat combo where we think like waiting to hold up interaction is possibly just like the worst thing because there are so many ways which they snook you, whether it be like any City of Solitude effect or counter magic of their own, or a lot of these decks they just kind of know how to play against on the stack interaction. But Bitter Ordeal is super proactive. You don't hold up any mana. You just like fire it off. You slow them down like undoubtedly tons of turns, and then you just get to keep playing your plan. I might missed anything there, like.
No, that's 100% it.
Oh, I just like the counter.
Oh, look, the other thing too is there's nothing sweeter than casting a Bitter Ordeal after you've had one land hit the graveyard from a fetch, and then the opponent just conceding, knowing that you're going to take both of their combo pieces.
Mm.
Yeah, I strongly agree. I love this card, and I love sorcery speed like hate cards in Jund. I'm really not a fan of the super reactive ones, especially ones that aren't zero mana, because I'm a curve out deck, and I don't want to be holding stuff up because then if I don't use it, I didn't play my 4/4, and like I'm not really doing anything, and I'm letting this combo player like build up some resiliency by getting extra cards and be able to interact with me. So I'm really a big fan of having something where I'm just like turn 3, I crack a fetch, cast Bitter Ordeal, take their like 2 breach pieces or whatever, and then I'm just sitting here smiling as I don't have the tax of having to hold things up, but I keep getting to slam in with my Pyrogoves and Slimefoots.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Like, I think people really underrate how good extract and things are, and like Bitter Ordeal with the Gravestorm as well. Like Gravestorm's, I think it's the only card in the game with this card. It has the same hard to counter aspect of it, where you can put quite a few copies on the stack, and that like unless they've got Flusterstorm or whatever, that it's going to get through.
And Mouse, there is, just for those people itching at home, there is one other card, and it's a blue spell that just recently got printed in a Commander product that investigates with Gravestorm. It's not very good. So this is the only like actually impactful card with this mechanic.
Right. Cool. With actually, this is a ruling question as well. I don't know if you know the answer to it because the Gravestorm is copy for each permanent put into a graveyard. That doesn't work with like land cyclers or malevolent rumble, right? Like it has to actually be a permanent on the battlefield to be put away.
Yeah, you can't discard it, or it doesn't like count for entomb things or whatnot, which is a bit of a shame.
Mhm.
But at least, like most of the time, my grave storms are only my own fetches. But
Yep.
still, having one or two fetches trigger this is enough.
Yeah, yeah, and it's like permanent put into a graveyard, so you can like fatal push their dude and then gravestorm as well, and that helps too.
Yeah, definitely hugely impactful.
Well, actually, I have one other question actually. Um, with Fury, it doesn't look like there's a huge amount of red cards. Like two of them, like three of them are pointed. Um, is Fury good enough in a list like this, or like, yeah, help me understand. Have you ever found yourself stuck without the red, or?
I feel like I have, but I feel like one of the things is Jund isn't often going to lose a creature matchup in the early game, right?
Mhm.
You've got like your early pincer point interaction. Your like two drops are really bulky. You clog up the board. So I find that even if Fury just costs 0 to evoke, I wouldn't need to do it that much. Most of the time in this deck, Fury is a 5 mana doofus, and
Yeah.
it has the break glass in case of emergencies mode. That sometimes you have the Oliphant in hand, you exile it, you go for it. But I feel like it's like 80% of time in my build of Jund, this like really flexible necrotile creature. And I like that part of it. And I'm not really relying on the pyrokinesis element.
Okay, but it's still like having it is still important. Like it's not better than it's like it is still better than like Chaos Defiler, for example, which is probably a better Necrotile than Fury would be.
Yeah, I agree. I think but also I feel like Jund is kind of has problems getting swarmed sometimes
Right.
instead of like one big dude. And that's why I like Fury over something like a Chaos Defiler.
Yep.
And
That like Force of Despairs in the sideboard as well for that kind of like swarm.
well, yeah, it's a Swarm, but also Force of Despair was like a medical for this tournament because I was expecting a lot of people playing Nadu piles, and
Hmm.
Force of Despair is a really good answer if they're about to go off with Nadu.
Okay, yeah, that
Because
makes sense.
if they they've got their Nadu in play, they put their nomads on the stack. Um, they play their Nadu, they're about to play their nomads. You kill the Nadu, or you can just like it's a way of interacting with that combo without having without like triggering the Nadu. It's
Yep,
also
that's cool.
it's also something I'm not playing anymore. I really had it just for that tournament. And now, obviously, there's been a change in pointing. Nadu's moved up, and it's just like reduced in popularity.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Well, actually, one other card which has sprung into my mind, Meltdown. Now, this
Mm.
is a card where I used to be really high on it, but now I'm really not. And my reasoning is that I feel like so many of these bots lists nowadays are playing creatures with such high CMCs. Like, you keep the Meltdown here and thinking, yeah, this is great, but they just like go turn to like Traxos or something. Um, and so I've tended to do more like kind of like Bifrost. Is Meltdown like have you found that as a weakness or is it there for like a different deck and not the one I'm thinking of?
Well, I'm so low on artifact hate anyway these days
Mhm.
because I feel like so much of the bots' real estate in the meta has moved to these Eldrazi decks that are way more resilient to artifact hate and like don't really fold to it in any way. And I feel like Meltdown and stuff is good against like Tolarian Wheels, but other than that, it's kind of just a bad magic card now. I feel like this artifact hate suite that I have is incredibly outdated because I don't really have any answers into Eldrazi which have taken that bot's mantle. Like if I was to register this deck today, it would have like pieces like Dampening Sphere, which I think are more impactful against Eldrazi players.
So you have a lot of these very strong cards in your deck, and even if you get into top deck mode, you're happy because you miss the top deck, everything's going to be great. What are some choices that your opponents often make that kind of seem like good plays, but from your point of view, look like blunders, and you're extremely happy when they do it when playing against you?
That's a really interesting question, Liam. I feel like basically, obviously, every game and every deck is different. But I feel like when people play into like creating a small game, that is when I'm like quietly smiling. Let me give you an example of this. Like if someone's just like aggressively trading off or putting me in situations where I can trade with them, I feel like I'm always just smiling as the junk player because I know that my next card is going to be a Barrowgrove, and my next card is any of these cards are going to stand on their own. Whereas a lot of the other like mid-range decks in the format are have like cards that don't stand on their own as much. Like for example, when you're looking against these white decks, they have like all these Mother of Runes and things that like are kind of just dirtily and nothing. Where I feel like if my opponent's helping me build towards a small game, I know that the Minskambu, the Oliphant, the Troll is coming.
So are you suggesting that they should try and keep the tension on the board rather than aggressively trade down?
Yeah, definitely. Main deck, I only have really one way to sweep, which is the Fury, and that's one card of 60 when I don't have much selection. And I feel like times where I've got into trouble is there's a board stall, then my opponent plays a Monarch card, my opponent plays an Initiative card, my opponent plays Fourth Eolingus, and then they can leverage their pre-existing board state, and the value of the top deck doesn't like matter as much. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Look, speaking as a non-CanCon runner-up, that was a extremely interesting insight that I'm going to have to deploy next time I play against you. But this look,
I'm
this
looking
is
forward to it.
this is a really cool take on Jund, even if you say it's the quintessential one. But as a Sultan of Stamina or a Lord of Long Game, the Veterans of Value, you've given us a list of cards that you think don't pass the smell test for being playable in Highlander. And I think we're going to have some pretty spicy discussions about them. So let's move on to the first one of those, which is
Yeah, and
Umazawa's Jitte.
And before we go through the list, I just want to say all these opinions are my own. You're probably going to often disagree with them. I think that's interesting. And if you see me on the Highlander streets, please come and argue with me about these cards.
Hell
Because
yes.
let me talk to you about Umazawa's Jitte. So when I first got into the format, I was a lowly elf player. I saw Umazawa's Jitte, a one-pointed card at the time, and was like, how do I ever beat this? Right? And then I was playing against in my first CanCon, I was playing against one of the great Sydney players, Ryan. I can't remember his last name, but he's like a really good Sydney grinder. And on both game 1 and game 2, he played turn 1 White Plume and turn 2 Jitte Equip against me as elf, and as an elf player, and I was like, oh my goodness, how do I beat this? This card is insane. And now that it's not pointed, I just feel like whenever my opponent plays a Jitte, I'm just like, oh, they've played this card that literally does nothing. Like, I feel like it doesn't take over the game as much. You just have access to kill the thing in response. But paying 4 mana to give your dude the Jitte text and get 2 counters doesn't really do that much unless you're rocking so many really impactful 1 toughness creatures. So I find that like when I see the Jitte in play, I'm just like quietly smiling to myself. What do you guys think about Jitte?
Oh, look, my contest on this is not necessarily that people should stop playing this. My first question is anyone playing this card? Like, I kind of like, I don't see it very much. But presumably, yeah, it's for the reasons which you're saying. I was one of the voices pushing for this thing to be depointed for exactly what you're talking about. Personally, I think that the real like issue with the card is just, I mean, there are 3. There's the one you talked about with the mana, the dying response to removal. But the other thing as well is just like creatures are just bigger than they used to be. Like Deathrite Shaman, Delighted Halfling are now like the bog standard mana dorks, and they have 2 toughness, not 1.
Exactly.
Yeah, gaining 2 life is not really that good anymore because the threat power is like more like Abhorrent Oculus or like Murktide Regent. Like you're getting smacked down for much more damage at a time than the 2 life can offset. I'm pretty much in agreement with you on this one, but I don't know if it's like a super prevalent card. Like I think like there's only a few people playing this.
I definitely think of the cards in this list, this is one of the cards that's seeing the least play. But I do still see like a handful of like white blade based mid range decks that are playing this in their Stoneforge packages. And I just say, don't do it. It's
Yeah.
bad.
All right, well let's hear the next one then, because I suspect we'll get a bit more disagreement.
Okay. I hate Snuff Out.
No.
Every time I have Snuff Out in Jund or in Grixis or in whatever deck I'm playing, I look at it in my hand, I see their Sheoldred, I see their Black Creature, and my heart just sinks because this removal spell that I'm relying on as like my removal spell that kills everything doesn't kill so many things that really matter. And I'm looking at a lot of the threats that are super impactful in the meta right now. And so many of them are just black. Psychic Frog, really scary magic card, it's black. Barrogoyf, it's black. Like, there's lots of things that really scare me that are these black creatures. And it means that I'm always afraid to play this card. And I'd much rather play Dismember over it. Or I've been known to play Terminate as like a card in Jund Shells that I'd much prefer to play over this, even though it's a card that costs like 2 mana. I just know that I can rely on it killing anything.
Let me fight you on a few of these points. So I agree if I was building a Jund deck, I wouldn't put Snuff Out in the deck. But I think this card has a home in Grixis. You hear me out on what you think of these reasons. I think specifically because it's free. There are certain cards like Ledger Shredder, or if you're in some sort of aggro deck like Malcolm of the Eyes or whatever, that really like being able to cast the second spell on the turn has a lot of equity. And also if you're running like a really mana tight game, like you've got cards like Daze or Gush, which put cards in your hand but take mana off the board, having these free spells is important. As well as like if you're running the blue card selection package, it's not so much about is this a card that I need to cast when I see it to be good. It's more like, is this a card that I want to have as an option to pick? Like if I expressive iteration, it's like, oh great, I can cast this for free as the exile per turn. So I would agree with you. This is not a good card in Jund, but I feel like in Grixis there's a lot of like non-obvious synergy that makes like these kind of free spells always worth considering.
I feel like the most salient point that you're making there is the way it aligns with the blue cards, and most notably card selection, because blue is most equipped to see a card, be like, this is bad here, I need to kill a black creature, and then not pick the Snuff Out in your ponder or brainstorm it away, or all these things, right? But I do just think that like a fair amount of the time when you really need it, it doesn't do what you want it to do. But I do agree that like free spells are great. Like they are some of the most powerful things in the game. And sometimes a Snuff Out can win you the game, but in the same way, it can also lose you the game because it doesn't kill what you need to kill.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, have you got any thoughts on this card, or do we want to move to the next one?
No, I've got nothing to add for Snuff Out.
All right, I hope, Max, that you can convince everyone to stop playing this card because it absolutely destroys me. But
I just think Maddening Hex is just one of the bigger do-nothing magic cards. Like, I find that I have won as the Blue Mage, casting multiple spells into the Maddening Hex and getting out of it because your opponents taken turn 3 off just to do something that really isn't impactful. And obviously sometimes you cast 2 spells into it, you roll a 5 and a 6, and that's impactful. But it's something that can be like easily answered and like kind of ignored, and it doesn't stop you from doing anything. If your opponent's in the position where they can jam Maddening Hex, you're probably on a high life total to start with. So you have probably 3 to 4 spells worth of like Maddening Hex to go through to either dig for an answer or just answer it. And if like my opponent has gone turn 3 Maddening Hex and then I Prismatic Ending their Hex or whatever, it's only cost me like 1 to 6 life. Like, I just don't think this card really answers decks that much, and especially with the way that the combo deck profile is looking at in this format, there's not too many like storm decks that this just like turns off entirely. What do you think, Miles?
Like, I'm in two minds about it. This card has very high highs. Like, the games where they don't have the answer, it does feel very game ending. But it does have, I think, this kind of unfortunate thing where it's both a sideboard card in a deck where your opponent is almost certainly sideboarding in Blue Blast against you.
Yes.
So yeah, they're going to have the answer to this, and so I've been in that position a lot where it's like Maddening Hex, great, Blue Blast this thing, it's over. But whereas you get a comparison, for example, like Choke, I find to be way more punishing because it's green. Like it's like there's unless I have the counter magic literally on the stack, there's not much I can do about it. I also think this card is like way worse against like white based combo and control decks because like Get Lost kills enchantments and Leyline Binding is becoming a more common kind of like I'm just going to play a couple of dual lands and play Leyline Binding. But I do think Maddening Hex is still probably quite good against like Blue Moon, provided they're not on the like creature centric like Dragon's Rage, Ledger Shredder. But even as I'm talking through this, I'm kind of like boxing this card in as being good against less and less decks. So you might be convincing me on this one. It's just obviously it's just so good against the decks that it is good against. Like it's almost like the perfect like you're totally done. But maybe it's not as versatile as it needs to be for a sideboard card.
I don't think I'm persuaded by these arguments because the use cases where you say it's bad, you play the prismatic ending or they have the blast, you're just describing times when they have the answer. But aren't the majority of sideboard cards just cards that you win the game if they don't have the answer? Like that's what this card is. If they don't have a removal spell for it, it's impossible for them to win. And if they don't have it in their hand at the time, all of their cantrips are now dead or close to it.
I feel like this still gives them permission to dig and permission to cast the spells. Like, it's not like a choke. It's not like a thing that locks your opponent out in any way. It just like gives them a countdown clock. And
I'll fight you on that. Like I know that I agree it's not as good as choke. But Sheoldred also gives people permission to dig. They can still dig, they're just taking 2 life per card. But the main comment that people say about Sheoldred is when it lands, if I don't have the answer for it, I'm going to be taking like 12 life or 10 life trying to find an answer. The only card that Sheoldred's more powerful against than Maddening Hex is Brainstorm because you're drawing 3 cards instead of 1. But like the Ponders, the Preordains, the Maddening Hex is doing more damage.
I think the problem is that Maddening Hex both simultaneously gives them permission to dig and permission to not dig. Because if I'm not doing anything into a Maddening Hex or I'm casting creatures or whatever, the Maddening Hex doesn't put pressure on me. But Sheoldred is a 4/5 beater with this stacks text that is hitting me down.
Yeah, I agree that if they're casting creatures, Maddening Hex is not doing anything. But the other example you gave is they're not casting anything, in which case Maddening Hex is doing great.
Yeah, I think that's true, but it hasn't killed you yet, right? And it lets them natively draw that thing still. I think the card, it definitely can provide some pressure. That's what it does. But I think compared to other hate cards, I would much prefer to play them instead.
Yeah, I will say this. I think what I'm convinced of is that this is way less flexible, particularly lots of combo decks, like hybrid combo decks. There's the chance that this is like 3 mana do nothing is higher than like a choke. and probably need to be in the business of pressuring their life total, like not relying on this to kill it by themselves. But there's probably like a time, a place, a deck, and a meta for this card. I don't know if people should like quote unquote stop playing it, but maybe people should really think about like, look, is this actually the best piece of hate available? Because there are definitely other ones.
Yeah, look,
Yeah.
if you what I will say that like my last comment on this is if you're in Canberra, you should definitely be playing this card because I've never not rolled a 6 when my opponent has cast a Maddening Hex. I have a 100% hit rate.
So, Line, does that mean that you should be playing Comet in all of your decks as well?
I don't know if I could sell my soul to to do that. Maybe I'll go for a slap on the pokies instead.
Yeah, Liam, you should go play dice games like craps or whatever.
Maybe.
Let's see what the next card is. Max, what's going on with this card, man? Isn't this card great?
See, I just think this is like the weirdest card that I see people playing in the Urza Saga packages. So I find I'm seeing lots of people playing like Lava Spur Boots alongside Shadow Spear in their Urza Saga's packages, and it just confuses me. I think that like I hate having cards in my deck that I don't want to draw. As someone who's like been a Green Sun Zenith enjoyer for a long time, I hate having my Dryad Arbor in my deck and drawing it because that's gross. And this card, whenever I see my opponent begrudgingly turn one play Lava Spur Boots, and it kind of does nothing, like I smile to myself. And obviously sometimes it creates like punchy turns with your saga, but Shadow Spear is way better. Having a hate piece is way better. Even getting a Soul Ring if you're a Soul Ring deck is way better. Like I'm just like so low on the impact of Lava Spur Boots. What do you think?
I mean, I just think it adds so much to the Saga package, right? Like it doubles the damage output on the turn it comes down. I agree it's not great to draw, but of all of the keywords to be able to put on a creature like haste is a pretty good one, in like a monarchy initiative type environment where you've got things like the Fable, the Mirror Breaker, really good tap ability. Well, like don't get me wrong, I think you've got to be a deck which wants to put haste on things. Um, yeah, you got to be a deck that wants to put haste on things accidentally to want this card. But I do think that like doubling the output of the Saga damage, like certainly from a control perspective, if my opponent earns a Saga and fetches up like a Soul Ring on turn 4 or a Shadow Spear, it's like a giant snore. Like I don't care. They can gain all the life they want. I don't block. What is extra mana going to do when I'm at the stage of the game where I'm casting actual hard counter magic? But the Lava Spur Boots is like great. I'm taking like 4 extra damage, and also every other creature they have now has haste. Like that is a problem, and maybe worth the price of top decking it sometimes.
I think these are all really salient points. I think my counter argument is I've never been looking deeply at lists and seeing people playing Lava Spur Boots instead of Shadow Spear. I see them playing Lava Spur Boots in conjunction with Shadow Spear, right?
Okay.
And I firmly believe that if you put 2 of these cards in your deck, now like 1 in 30 of the cards in your deck is a blank to draw, right? A card you never want to draw. And as someone who's played my fair share of Flash and know how terrible it is to draw your Cauldron Familiar or your Viscera Seer, like I feel like most decks that are like mid-rangey, which is most Saga decks, really don't want to be adding these super dead cards. It kind of aligns with my philosophy of like top decks, where even though I admit a Lava Spur Boots can be really impactful in doubling that damage output, I would much rather increase my chances of my top decks and my cards being impactful when I draw them or I see them in my opening hand.
I can be behind you that like the difference between 1 and 2, like quote unquote dead draws, is a big one. Does that mean though that people should just be like, look, just pick between Lava Spear and Shadow Spear, but 1 on the sideboard, 1 in the main, and do game 2 and 3 with the correct one, versus putting both?
I think that's really interesting. I kind of like that because I definitely see like in a world where if everyone's playing control, I think Lava Spur Boots is way better, right? And in a world where people are playing more aggro and mid-range, I see Shadow Spear being way better, right? And so swapping them out or picking which one is more targeted to the metagame you expect at any given tournament, I think is a pretty reasonable sort of thought process. But I just believe, partly because of the kind of decks I mostly play, and from what I've seen whenever my opponent pays 1 mana for this card, I just feel like this one is the least impactful.
Yeah. I guess the only other scenario I could justify this would be something like you're playing like a white deck. You've got Stoneforge Mystic because you really just want to get Pre or Form Aware, but you also run Felia, you run Ephemerate. Like the chance of like bringing things back or whatever, or copying things is pretty high, and just having just a few more pieces to pick up off the Stoneforge is, like a bit of an engine. Like I could imagine that, but I'm not super high on Stoneforge right now, so maybe that's like, maybe that speaks to what you're talking about. That kind of strategy is not where to be at the moment.
Stoneforge should probably be on this list as like a wet noodle Magic card you shouldn't be playing. I'll double down that I think that card's pretty slow and dirtily right now, but I think like playing more bad cards, I've got inverted commas here, to justify your other bad cards doesn't seem like a recipe for success in my book.
Or maybe it's what 7-Point Highlander is all about.
I was going to say, hold on, that sounds like we're playing a combo deck or a synergy deck. Let's go.
Synergy? Gross. That's not what I like.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's see what the next card's all about. All right. This is like the new hotness, right? What's wrong with this card?
Okay, so I played a lot of Spring Heart Nantuko in Jund, trying to make it work, and playing in like other Nadu strategies where I think it is legitimately good. But I feel like this card is just always disappointing, or you use it to win a game that you would already win just a little bit quicker, right? So I find that, let's say Spring Heart Nantuko didn't have the bestow test, right? I don't think this card is playable. I think just like it's a 1/1 that makes 1/1s. It gums up the board a little bit. Maybe things can be sacked to Grist if you're like a Jund Mage. But I think that card always seems subpar. But the amount of times where I'm like really excited, I try and put my Spring Heart Nantuko on something and it gets killed right out from underneath is like massive. And you're spending so much mana trying to get these effects that I just feel like this card is so like contingent on like you having all these things that stick around. And in this format these days, either your opponent's got answers for what you're doing or they're killing you.
Yeah, you're gonna actually. Surprisingly, I actually agree with this a lot. I think this deck belongs in Gaia's Cradle decks and not many other places. Because like that deck, like Gaia's Cradle natural order decks can really leverage having spare green bodies lying around. But I agree that if you're just kind of like a typical 1-for-1 mid-range grinding deck, like the dream of resolving your pitch elemental and then putting Spring Heart and then having a land drop, like there's a surprisingly large amount of setup. Like usually the card you have on turn 2 is a mana dork, which is not that great to spend turn 3 copying. So I actually agree with you. I don't think this card is that good.
And I agree with you, Mouse. I think also one thing to acknowledge is this card often creates a really weird tension where, because the 2-drop is so bad, and especially bad on turn 2, you're really trying to hold this for later in the game when you have an opportunity to bestow it. But this gives your opponent time to run over you. And I assume we'd all agree that if the card was just the aura itself, that's not playable. So it kind of creates this weird tension.
Yeah, it's definitely more. It feels to me more of a 4-drop than a 2-drop. Kind of the same way that like Nissa Resurgent Animist is kind of a bit more of a 4-drop than a 3-drop, but at least the Animist pays you back the mana for the waiting time, so you can kind of then catch back up.
And Nissa Resurgent Animist gets you something gas, right? Well, this relies on you already having something gas.
Yeah, okay. Look, I was when I saw this card on the list, I was like, yeah, interesting. But I thought about it. I'm like, yeah, I actually think I'm going to agree with what Max has to say on this one. Are you part of the chorus now, or do you disagree on this one?
Oh, I'm a no Nantuku hater, so I didn't need any convincing.
Yeah, fair enough. All right,
Yeah.
let's see the next card.
Boom.
Oh, Max, come on, me.
Are you wearing a helmet, Max?
I'm protecting myself. Why? Is Mouse the world's #1 Portent fan?
Oh, look, no. I don't think this card should be in every deck, but I do think that this card has a home. But just tell me, why is this card bad?
So I tap my blue mana for my cantrip, right? I've tapped my island. And I don't draw a card? I have to wait till next turn? I've been like playing my most recent deck du jour is I've been playing Breach, right? And whenever I want to learn a deck for the first time, I find the most recent successful list and just play that, right? And I played Brandon Owen's Breach list that top 8 at CanCon, and it's playing Portent in this combo deck. And every time I cast it, I'm like, but I can't chain the cantrips or I can't do what's happening next. I have to wait a whole turn cycle. I think like Portent is much better in reactive strategies where like you want to use the mana on their turn, and I can see it having a role in control decks. But I just feel like this card is just not doing what I want. I've been playing like cards like Sleight of Hand over it because you get that card immediately, and I'm much more of a fan of that.
I actually agree with everything you've said. I would just say Portent, I think, is really important. If you're like a control deck which is doing flash stuff on their turn, like, you know, your counter magic is instant, your removal is instant, even your threats might be like Brazen Burrow or Hornlock Whale. I think this card's very important. Important even. But because it's like just another ponder. But I will agree with you that I don't put this in my proactive strategies build. This is like 80% of my deck has flash. I play Portent. But yeah.
Now, so I have a question for you. And Liam, you can also answer this. How many times have you cast Portent target your opponent?
Oh, like at least 50% of the time.
Oh my goodness, you're a madman.
No, because look, this is the thing, right? Like there are so many times, particularly when I'm playing Blue Moon, and I've got access to like Tameo and Snapcaster Mage, where there's a point in the game where it's like I Portent you, and then 1 or 2 turns later, when the good card's coming, I flashback and I Portent you again. And like I love a Portent target the opponent in a control strategy, and I am often doing it.
Well, Mouse, maybe you're convincing me. Maybe this whole setup of me shouting about why Portent is bad is wrong, and I just need to start Portenting my opponent instead.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a control only thing, I think, but I do think it is a cool thing which you can definitely do, and also like it, you know, in control there are other like things to consider, like if they haven't got many cards in your hand, portioning the top of the deck is actually kind of like better than git probing, because it means that when you do your card selection, you know what's coming. There's some play to that line.
I think I have this one time I got portented by an opponent, and he wrote down my the top three cards in the order, and he wrote it right in front of me, where I had to like really try hard not to look and see what my top 3 cards were, and so that was really bad. But I do think that Portent is a card which does have some place. But
Max, I think next time I play Portent, I'm going to write down 3 cards that are not there and really screw with the head. Bait them into cracking the fetch.
That's the one that I mind trick.
Go ahead, Max.
Oh, no, you go, and then we'll go to the next card.
I was just saying Liam is the Jedi Master of Canberra. He's got the trick.
Yeah, so what it is that they've got 2 absolute bombs and a fetch land on top, and you write down fetch land, ponder or something, and then they fetch away their bombs.
No. This is Liam's mind trick, okay? If anyone's played against Liam, they know exactly what this mind trick is. You're in the middle of the game, and Liam's got like 4 cards in his hand, and then he gushes, and he's got like a million cards in his hand. You're thinking, far out, what's going to happen? And you like attack, and then he dies, and then he flips open his hand, and they're all lands. That's the Liam Jedi mind trick.
That's happened to me against Liam so many times.
Yeah.
That's why I started playing lands, because they were just permanently glued to the top of my library. It's unreal.
All right, let's I'm just mindful of time. Let's have a couple more of these, and then we'll wrap it up. God, Max, you're killing me again, man. Dress down. This card's great.
Okay, so this is my one of my interesting ones where I believe that when I have a sideboard card, no matter what deck I'm building or tuning or whatnot, I want all my sideboard cards to really do one thing really well, like blow up all the artifacts really well, stop the islands untapping really well, right? But I feel like Dress Down does a lot of things kind of okay. Like it's kind of good at countering ETBs. It's kind of good at like killing saga tokens. It's kind of good at a bunch of things, but even in the matchups where I might bring it in, I'm not guaranteed that it's going to be good because it engages with different cards so uniquely. And so I believe that Dress Down, even though it can have good power and equity in some matchups, because the card is not like a windmill slam destroyer, I don't want to be slotting it into my decks.
Okay, look, I will come in really heavily in favor of Dress Down. I agree that this is not a sideboard card; it's a main
Ooh.
deck card. Like,
In
if you're a
control
deck,
only, or
yeah, so I'm thinking from a control perspective. I wouldn't play this in like Grixis because it's not very proactive for 2 mana. In my mind, this is definitely a control card because you're happy to just cantrip. But if you're interested in Dress Down, you should be playing it in the main, because it's just got some game against literally everything. Like fourth Ealing is the guys lose haste, so the Monarch's not going to be triggered. The initiative stops them from happening. Saga tokens, they're a pain in the ass to control. It's like this one land created 2 bodies to Dress Down, wipes them both up. That's really important. There are some creatures which have like hexproof or ward. I've known that it's like, oh, what's my out here? Well, my out is I Dress Down and then Brazen Borrow or whatever they've got. Like, if you're in Blue Moon and the big removal, quote unquote, is a bit narrow, Dress Down can make a lot of other removal better. Also, this is like really marginal, but I promise this actually matters. Like having an enchantment which puts self in the bin is really important if you want to make Unholy Heat a playable removal spell. It's like the reason why I'll put baubles in all of my Blue Moon decks because like Unholy Heat being the 6 damage one is just really, really excellent. And how I often get the fourth type is I draw one of Dress Down or one of the baubles. Um, and so like I think it's really important for all those reasons. But I'll agree with you that like your sideboard cards should really be like Omega tier silver bullets, and this is not an Omega tier silver bullet. It's just like a really solid card, which its floor is just the lowest thing ever. Its floor is like, oh, I just drew a card. So I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on Dress Down as like the main board control catch-all card?
well, I once again really like your argument. I think we're saying the same thing in the sense that I like my main deck cards having widespread flexibility. And even though this doesn't do anything really well, it does a lot of things okay. So that's okay for a main deck card. But when I see these sideboard decks like relying on it, that's why when I think it's a bit silly. So if I ever I don't think I ever will, but if I ever decide that it's a good thing to register control for a tournament, it's a card I'll think about, but I'll never put in a sideboard for anything.
Yeah, yeah. I think we probably do agree then. Lime, do you have anything for Dress Down, or is there one more card to talk about?
No. That's the end of the Max's hate card list.
Oh, awesome.
Oh no, I lied. I lied. Sorry.
A licensed hearse coming from the graveyard to bring back the end of this segment. What is wrong with this one?
So Unlicensed Hearse is one of the most played sideboard cards in the format, and I just think in recent memory there are so many cards that I would rather fill my graveyard slot than Unlicensed Hearse because it it does things okay, but it doesn't do things as impactful enough as I would like. Firstly, as you may have remembered from my Jund list earlier, that Jund list was playing Ghost Vacuum, right? I feel like for targeted graveyard hate, Ghost Vacuum is so much better because your opponent is often trying to get something out really quickly, like put something in the graveyard, get it out of the graveyard, and put it onto the battlefield. And so having something to to get the important targeted things right out of there, you need that one drop card, right? Where spending your turn 2, where you could be either like holding up interaction or developing a threat. I feel like Hearse is like such a hard thing to sprinkle into your sequencing, while having the 1 mana Ghost Vacuum is way better. Then also, if you want something that like removes heaps of cards from the graveyard, like to stop your opponent from doing delve spells or Oculus or whatever, this does an okay job, but you'd much rather have like a Rest in Peace or a Leyline or something that's a catch-all, or even a one-use thing like a Toolmod's Crypt or a Relic of Progenitus that like stops your opponent from doing things at particular times. So I feel like Unlicensed Hearse, like what I was saying about Dress Down, is not like a catch-all graveyard problem destroyer card, but kind of only just does an okay job at some things.
Yeah, I'm actually going to agree with a lot of this. I think the difference between 2 and 1 mana is like colossal. Especially if you're on the draw, like the idea that you're like going to stop your graveyard combo opponent by landing the Unlicensed Hearse after they've had their turn 3 or whatever. Like, when they're untapping into their turn 3 seems a bit far-fetched. Certainly, I like the Ghost Vacuum a lot. Being able to on turn 2, like, cast the Ponder or whatever, find the Ghost Vacuum, then cast the Ghost Vacuum is very good. I do think, though, that certainly Unlicensed Hearse is very good in decks which are interested in using the body. Like, I don't view this as being... Like, to me, this card is kind of like colorless Scavenging Ooze in a way, where it's like, I'm not necessarily playing this card to hate out the graveyard. Like, it's not a collector oof tier block, like, destroyer of game plans. But it's just like, it is a very big body. Like, if the game is going to go to turn 5 or 6, this thing will hit them for 8. Or, like that's it. That's good. That is very good. So to me, it occupies that kind of slot. But I agree that in general, it's not the hoser that people think it is. And I think even in the semi-finals of this year's CanCon, Scotty's opponent played an Unlicensed Hearse to stop, I assume, cards like Barragloif and Oculus, and it just did nothing. Like, they're just putting card between Fetchland, Surveillance, the Dragon's Race Challenge triggers, Ledger Shredder, Connives. Like, there's just so many ways of putting cards in the graveyard. This is not going to keep up with the chip away. You definitely need a hoser if you want that. But do you agree that for decks that want a body, this card does offer something kind of like a Scavenging Ooze?
I agree and I disagree, because one of the things that I find is a frustrating tension is, unless I think my Unlicensed Hearse attack is going to be lethal, if I'm attacking with the Unlicensed Hearse, as it doesn't have Vigilance, I'm removing the graveyard hate aspect. So if my opponent has cards stuck in their hand that interact with the graveyard, I'm now turning them on by attacking, and often, like, I've made my 6 or 8 damage attack, but now my opponent can do something insane, like entomb their Grizzlebrand, Reanimated, and win the game. And so I feel like I'd much rather play something which either is a creature that can like exile like a Scooz or like a Keen-Eyed Curator, or play an effect that's a more dedicated exile hate piece.
Yeah, look, that's fair. I think there might be a home for this, but I do largely agree with a lot of the weaknesses of this card. That it is expensive. It's not as much of a hoser. The attacking isn't free. This is definitely a card people should not automatically put in. They should think about if it gels with their deck's plan really well.
Strongly agree.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that truly is all of them, right?
Yeah, I don't know. Have I baited you for one more card?
Have you?
No.
No. Max, thank you so much for coming on, man. This was a blasted episode, and I really like these little debates about the relative merits of cards and where they belong, where they don't. And I'd be really keen to hear what the audience thinks as well. That is provided we get an audience.
I'm definitely...
yeah.
Oh, sorry, Max. I'm definitely excited to have people angry at me and shouting at me about my opinions.
Oh, Max, you're just too likable to be angry to have that much anger at, mate. I imagine people might approach you for polite discussion,
I'm down for that.
I will say, guys, if you are in the audience and listening, first of all, please subscribe to the YouTube channel so that you get updated when more episodes of this podcast are released. And also, if you've got some insights, some experience, a unique deck or an archetype you've got some experience with and had some success with, please reach out because we'd like to have you on the podcast. And if you want to have a little part of the segment where we talk about some merits of cards and you've got some hot takes, bring them along as well because this was really fun.